Good morning. Welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could join us. Our analysts this week are Ray Richardson of WLOB Radio and attorney Ken Altshuler, who was the longtime co-host of the WGAN Morning News. Gentlemen, good to see you on this Valentine's weekend.
Yes, happy Valentine's Day tomorrow. There you go.
People of the state of Maine got a Valentine from the governor a few days ago. Governor Mills delivered the State of the State address. The highlights include a plan for $500 relief checks for Mainers, reflecting about half of the more than $800 million revenue surplus. Also $20 million for 2 years of community college tuition for high school graduates, tens of millions more for hospitals and nursing homes. Ken, I'll start with you. What did Governor Mills score with, and where did she fall short?
Well, I think she scored with all of that. I am not a big fan of sending out checks. I don't think it really stimulates the economy, but it sure feels good to people who get the checks. And it was a good political move. And since the Republicans say this was a political speech, which the State of the Union is always a political speech, it's a smart thing to do. The Republicans had proposed it. So that was a good move. I think the community college tuition plan is a good one. I think it's something that returns to our state money to help young people go to school, go to college, and stay here. I like her thing about broadband being available to everybody in 2 years. That's a laudable goal. We'll see if it works. But I think the speech and all the proposals overall were excellent.
As you may imagine, I'm going to disagree. I think this $500 check thing is such a scam on the people of Maine. And I know people are hurting and they may hear that and they say, well, you've got money. I don't. 500 means a lot to me. Here's the thing. If she was going to spend $400 million to do this, she could have brought down the state's income tax to 5%. Had she done that, you may recall about John Baldacci. He talked about cutting Maine's income tax burden, and the Wall Street Journal wrote a piece called Maine's Miracle. John didn't get it done, but the very idea we were going to deal with our income tax issue, they thought it was such a big deal. She could have done this, but she's going to give out political checks. And I know the Republicans are on board with it, but this Republican isn't. I think it's bad policy.
But Ray, let me ask you a question. What gets more votes, a $500 check or this lowering of the tax rate that people feel real good about and it's sound policy, but wouldn't generate an immediate positive response? I agree with you. I think sending out checks is not a great way of doing it, and I'd like to see the tax rate lowered. But if you are trying to prepare yourself for a tough election coming up in November, what would you do?
Well, I wouldn't do this. And when George W. Bush did it 20 years ago, I was incredibly critical of him. Republicans turned on me for it. You remember when he gave out $300 and $600 to families? It was a $30 billion drop in the bucket. It's like dropping a pebble in the middle of Sebago Lake and expecting a tidal wave to happen. It's just foolish policy. But I'm not the governor, and if she gets away with it, she gets away with it.
And of course, former Governor LePage, the expected Republican nominee, has made it clear he wants to push to eliminate the income tax, if not just buy it down. So we're going to hear a lot more about this. Now, the Republican Party has been arguing this week that the true state of the state is a broken healthcare system with what they say is rationed care, destruction of the lobster industry, higher energy costs, higher grocery prices. Ray, how much of that will or should stick to Janet Mills in this election year?
Well, I don't think you can blame Governor Mills for the inflation or the bare shelves, but I do believe the rationing of healthcare in this state falls directly in her lap. Look, we had a nursing shortage in this state before Janet Mills was governor, but that was a burning fire that she poured gas on. And now, as you guys know, we have people in this state in the healthcare business who are COVID positive who are treating patients. We already had a crisis, and she just made it worse. It was bad policy from the get-go, and that falls at her feet. The rest of the stuff, the lobstering stuff, is regulations from the Fed. Inflation is not her fault. Bare shelves is not her fault. I mean, you walk into Hannaford, my goodness, the shelves are pretty bare. You can't blame Janet Mills for that.
Well, I agree on everything except the healthcare situation. Obviously, he's absolutely right. She's not responsible for the high rate of inflation, the supply chain being dismantled. None of that is her fault. Now, that doesn't mean people won't blame her for it or Paula Page won't blame her for it. The healthcare has always been a problem here. It's the availability of nurses has always been a problem. But with regard to COVID, she is following, like it or not, the quote, quote, science and the advice of the CDC and the health experts. I don't think she gets blamed for that. I think when you look at what the vaccination rate is in Maine and the low death rate comparatively to the rest of the country, I think she'll get high marks, and I don't think it'll affect her at all.
Let's shift our eyes to Washington for a moment. Aaron Amide plans to challenge Congresswoman Shelley Pingree in a 1st Congressional District Democratic primary. He is a 26-year-old political newcomer, an Army veteran who works as a certified nursing assistant in Westbrook. Now, part of his pitch is that it's time for a new generation of leadership in Congress. But Ken, is there any reason to think that 1st District Democrats are unhappy with Shelley Pingree?
No. Her approval ratings are as good as anybody from Congress. Not that congressional approval ratings are great, but she's popular in the 1st District. And look, I agree with him. I like new blood and I like term limits, so I don't disagree with him. But he's not from Maine. That doesn't go against him because Shelley Pingree's not from the 1st District either. However, I don't think he's going to gain much traction. I think people like Shelley. I don't think people are going to think she did a bad job in the 1st District. I think it's a valiant effort, but it's not going to go anywhere. And I think he should probably do some more local stuff first, get a name for himself, then move up maybe through the legislature. I don't think you just start running for Congress because you think there should be a change.
But then maybe you're ready for whenever Shelley Pingree is not in office anymore. So, Ray, what do you think?
Obviously, I'm not a Democrat, so to speak for one would be crazy. But I do think there's a lot of unrest with Shelley because she has no discernible accomplishments in Congress. You know, people will say, well, she was in the minority for a while. That is true, but she's been in the majority as long as she's been in the minority. She has never sponsored a bill that has passed. Now, she has co-sponsored other people's legislation. I haven't met this young man, but I'm dying to. He's the right kind of guy. You know, he's a young man. He's well educated. He served our nation in the military, and he's 26 years old. He's got the kind of energy you'd like to see. We'll see what happens. Do I think Shelley Pingree is going to lose a Democratic primary? No, but boy, would I love to see it.
Gentlemen, 3 words have led to some infighting among Republicans: legitimate political discourse. That language was used when the Republican National Committee censured 2 Republican representatives, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, for taking part in the investigation of the January 6th assault on the Capitol last year. Republicans from Mitt Romney to Mitch McConnell have pushed back. Senator Susan Collins, for one, says those who assaulted police officers, broke windows, and breached the Capitol were not engaged in legitimate political discourse, and to say otherwise is absurd. She also says any moment relitigating a lost election or defending criminals, quote, moves us further away from the goal of victory this fall. So, Ray, I'd ask you, are Republicans making a mistake by focusing on the last election instead of the next one?
Oh, absolutely. I could not agree with that statement more. I am no fan of Adam Kinzinger. I'm no fan of Liz Cheney. I'm not been a fan of Dick Cheney. That goes back a long ways. I think censuring them is ridiculous. When the Republicans in Maine wanted to censure Susan Collins over the impeachment vote, this idea of legitimate political discourse, it is such a clumsy statement. It's ridiculous. We had a riot at the Capitol. I don't believe it was a coup d'etat. I don't believe it was an insurrection, but we clearly had a riot at the Capitol. We should all be ashamed of it. Republicans should feel awful about this. And then to try to somehow legitimize it, and I hope they are punished to the fullest extent of the law.
Ken, Democrats must be enjoying this infighting among the Republicans.
Well, that's after the Democrats in Arizona censored Senator Sinema, which was equally stupid. I mean, I don't understand why you're eating your own. You know, that's just really ridiculous. And I agree with him. I don't agree with him that it was not an insurrection inspired and directed by Donald J. Trump. But here's what I want to say. 71% of Republicans in the United States of America believe that the election was fraudulent. 71% of Republicans. That's the problem. And if you're going to continue the big lie, you can continue to have Republicans do this. I applaud the Republicans who say, even if you believe it was fraudulent, which it wasn't, at least they're saying, let's move forward. That's wise. That's smart. That's legitimate. You're undermining our Constitution by eroding confidence in our voting system. And shame on those Republicans who continue to perpetuate the big lie.
There's a growing bipartisan push to ban stock trading for members of Congress. Jared Golden is backing one of the proposals. Ken, is it a good idea? And there are multiple versions here. Can they be reconciled to actually become law?
I think Ray and I are going to agree on this. It's a great idea. We've talked about this before. There is no basis for anybody in Congress to have insider information, which they all do. And this extends to their spouses. If you're not going to include the spouses, then you're being you're being foolish, because insider information is in Congress every single day. You can buy mutual funds. You can put your stocks in a blind trust. There's ways to do this. It'll be reconciled. The only thing I agree with is that if you inherit some stocks, you should be able to put that in a blind trust. I don't think that's the same thing as buying something based upon insider information. But if you think Congress doesn't know exactly what stocks are going to go up and down, you're not paying attention. And that includes COVID and vaccinations. And we've been doing this for 30 years. Let's end this now.
Amen, Ken. I could not agree more. I mean, you think about it logically, Congress makes bills that become law that regulate these industries. The executive branch, they do the rulemaking for the laws. The Supreme Court, it interprets these laws, whether they're fair or foul, according to the Constitution. These people have so much authority over these companies. And then to use that as insider information or getting tips from lobbyists and then going and directly buying or selling stocks based on that, it's immoral, it's unethical, it lacks integrity. And I cannot believe, here we are, 233 years into the Republic, 2022, and we're talking about this. Members of Congress who are doing this should resign in disgrace. It is so wrong. Martha Stewart went to jail for what? $250,000 worth of insider trading? Some of these people are trading millions. This is a disgrace.
This week, a hospital in Maine was ordered to pay more than $200,000 to a psychologist who successfully sued under Maine's 1949 equal pay law. Claire Mundell sued, arguing that Acadia Hospital paid her about half of what her male counterparts were getting for the same work. Now, it appears to be the first time a judge has ruled under this 73-year-old statute. Ray, is this going to be a wake-up call for Maine business?
Well, I hope that it is. You know, I would love to see a system where when someone applies for a job, you don't know their name, you don't know their gender, you just get to see what their qualifications are. I didn't look at all the specifics of this case, but unless there was a reason based on experience or something that we don't really know about, men and women should be paid the same for what the work that they do. There should be no equivocation on this. I'm glad it happened, and maybe it will be a wake-up call. We don't need to pass more laws. We just need to enforce the laws that are on the books. Men and women are equal in the workplace unless education or experience dictates otherwise.
Ken, as an attorney, are these cases hard to make? Is that why it's taken so long for this law to be invoked in this way?
You know, Pat, that's a great question. It's a very clear law. You can pay somebody less if somebody else is more qualified. It has ways to distinguish between the pay. But in this case, if an employer just pays different wages because one's a man, one's a woman, and you can't justify it, you should be held accountable. So it shouldn't be hard to prove there's a reason why the pay is different. Justice Walker made a great decision. I saw a quote by former Justice Donald Alexander from the Supreme Court saying it was a clear case of discrimination because it's very easy to prove you're not doing it. So therefore, it's very easy for the petitioner to prove that it was discrimination. I applaud it. I agree with Ray 100%.
All right, let's wrap up with winners and losers in politics this week. Ray, we'll start with you.
My winner is the local band 12OC. They're three brothers and one of their best friends. They're a young group of guys. They are absolutely incredible. They work hard. They play everywhere they can. Well, now they're opening up for country music star Scotty McCreery. So the reason this applies to Political Brew, it is proof positive that in America, if you're talented and you work hard, good things can happen for you. They're my winners.
Love it. Any loser this week?
Nah, I don't want to do losers.
All right, Ken, what do you got?
I'll do a loser for Ray, but first the winners, the Maine people, because we have an economy that's on the rebound. We have one of the highest rates of vaccinations in the country, one of the lowest death rates from COVID in the country. We are in February, so baseball season begins soon. Warm weather will arrive again. So I think we're in a nice place, and the COVID is starting to go down. So I see rosy things on the horizon for Maine people. They're the winners. The loser I'm going to say is Paul LePage, and this is why. And it's not personal. It's that he's entering an election cycle where he couldn't have things going against him more than now, because Janet Mills has got an influx of federal money that it's going to help her say the economy is doing well, Maine's doing well. Why change it if it's not broken? It's not that it's all her because of something she did, but it's a matter of timing. She's in a lucky position. So I think Paul LePage is facing a real uphill battle right now.
We'll have a long time to talk about that, that's for sure. Ray, Ken, thanks so much. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time on Political Brew. News Center Maine is back after this.